Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of the Emerald Planet and Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet of 9 billion people by 2038 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to take care of all these people on planet Earth? And that's what Emerald Planet's all about. We come to you looking at the solutions, the best practices from around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us.
We're looking at an entire city and how it's going to move forward through the 21st century to 2050 and beyond. And we have the director of the Department of Energy and Environment, the Honorable Tommy Wells, Esquire. He is the director. And the interesting thing about this is the first city, Washington, D.C., capital of the United States, is the first LEED Platinum city in the world. And I'm not sure if there's been any others that have joined into that august standing or not. But Tommy Wells, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Sam, it's great to see you again, and I enjoy your show. And thank you for what you do.
Well, we really appreciate you because you've really been doing a fantastic job as director. And I just want to throw this in as a promotion. We now have the urban forest, the rain gardens, the rain barrels, and the pavers all out of your program at the Department of Energy and Environment, and everything is working absolutely fantastic. So I don't mind being your poster child for that if you need it in the future, because these four systems are doing great for controlling stormwater.
And thank you for doing your part to help clean our stormwater. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's working very well, and we can talk about that. But thank you for being here. What we're going to be talking about right now is climate change and livability in the district. How do you combine these two together, the livability and climate change?
Well, as you know, climate change certainly has an impact, but the first impact is that the climate is changed. Mm-hmm. It's going to be in DC, it's going to be hotter, wetter, and a little wilder, in terms of storms. So in terms of livability, we have to prepare for those changes. And frankly, what we believe is that, and within 30 years, our climate will be Nashville's climate, what Nashville's is today. So mm-hmm. That means that we're going to be doing a lot more cooling than heating.
Now, that's just absolutely amazing. And looking at the city, of course, we're getting many of these very severe storms that are coming through, and those are increasing on a year-by-year basis. And so what are you actually thinking about as far as climate change and livability? And we're going to get in some of the specifics in a minute, but just how does that impact you as the director for the department?
Well, for us to do our part, the main cause of climate change from DC, greenhouse gases, 74% of the greenhouse gases DC is responsible for is from our buildings, our built environment. Mm-hmm. And so we have a number of programs to retrofit the built environment to reduce the number of greenhouse gases. But at the same time, that gives us an opportunity to, in low income neighborhoods, put solar on roofs, bring people's power bills down, help with their cost of living. And we do community solar to where we can put solar. We've put solar farm on a brown field, and that is serving and cutting the bills in half for 780 households in that neighborhood in a low income area. So we leverage solar, we leverage retrofits of homes. We do these things to increase livability for our residents.
Yeah, and the one thing we're actually adding this, so I guess this will be the fifth program between you and the department um, in Washington, D.C., is the solar. And there are a number of people in Wards 8 and Ward 7, which are some of the most economically challenged wards in the district, are now paying zero as far as their power bills with the new programs you have for solar. So I want to thank you for that. But looking at this chart in front of us, let's go through this, Tommy. This is something that we need to know about. And how do you see this playing out over the next 10, 15, 20 years? And I'm going to ask you this question quite a few times as we go through this today, not to be redundant, but so that people really understand what you're thinking about, the philosophy, the policies, but the actions, which is most important for Emerald Planet, that you are actually doing.
So we started with the Sustainable DC plan, and that's kind of the parent plan that now gets us to Climate Ready DC, Clean Energy DC, and Resilient DC. And so under that, we have to do two things. We have to do our part to reduce greenhouse gases that cause climate change. Then we have to adapt our built environment to a changed climate. And then we have to create resiliency with our, especially low income neighbors, where my recovery and resiliency plan is the credit card in my wallet. If I need to go somewhere else, be in a safer place. But we have a lot of people that are what we call unbanked. And they are, unfortunately, it's an issue of environmental justice. But historically, we've built affordable housing in the cheapest parts of the city where the land is cheapest. And you know where that is. That's in your
Right.
flood zone. We saw what happened in New Orleans. Also around your industrial areas. Those are hot areas without trees. So we have to do this in an equitable way that we restore the environment, we help resiliency among our neighbors, and then we prepare for a changed climate, which is going to be, again, very intense storms, like you said, flooding in areas that we've never flooded before. We, as you know, we had a flood a few years ago down a canal road where people had to get out of their cars and stand on their hoods of their cars. And there was a national weather alert, which means you only get that when lives are in danger. This is the first one DC had ever had. And
My
then,
goodness, it's
and
incredible.
so then you had another storm in the northern part of our city on September 10th. And we're still helping families clean up, get mold out, and help them with their homes. So the weather's changed. We need to help our residents, but also we have to protect our assets and then do our part to reduce greenhouse gases.
Right. And looking at this too, the net zero new buildings, net zero retrofits, I think that is really critically important. Looking at these four impactful areas, highlight very quickly, because we want to move through, there's much information we have, Tommy, these four areas, and how does this all fit together?
Well, in terms of greenhouse gases and doing our part, but then also resiliency, we know that with transportation, that the our subway is now vulnerable to flooding, like we had not known we were before. We're with more floods in the, we're on two tidal rivers, the Potomac and Anacostia. So when a hurricane comes in from the coast, it pushes the Chesapeake and then DC's waters up. And we've had our sea level rise has already happened over the past 50 years of about 11 inches, and it's accelerating. So we have to protect our power stations. We have to protect our subways. We have to protect the assets of the city. And then the next part is we have to protect our buildings. And our buildings need, we need to help them in flood zones. We need to help them with the high heat that's happening. We need to help them reduce their power, but also new development. Let's not be putting new development of special affordable housing in flood zones. As you know, Sam, the 500-year flood zone really is not 500 years anymore.
Not
That you can
anymore.
get that same flood in the same year.
Right.
So let's protect people, neighborhood and communities. We're going to need, we need to cool our neighborhoods. We need to plant trees. As you know, trees are magic. They cool things to make you feel better, but they renature the city, and they take up water, which is very helpful. And then with our communities, we need to put in some resiliency hubs with solar power batteries so that they have a place to charge their phones, keep their medicines cool, should their power get knocked out. And then, of course, governance and implementation. That's me. We develop regulations, we get laws passed. And frankly, my philosophy is you can't leave it to the market. The government has to get involved in order to accelerate the changes that we need to make.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, Tommy. You know this because of your years on city council and being involved in around city government for decades now. Is that government in the United States, even though we say it's a free enterprise system, has always been involved in what's going on as far as policy is concerned, and it needs to do that for the future. So, and this is some of the impacts that we're actually seeing. This is just what you were talking about.
Absolutely. And, the last 2 years, Sam, as you know, were the 2 wettest years on record in DC. So we're getting more rain, we're getting more flooding. Past 5 years, the hottest 5 years. So if you mix hot with evaporation and you bring in, different changing climates, you get explosive storms. And that's what we see. Now, sea level rise, Haynes Point, which is on the Potomac River where the channel meets, and it is a national park. And every day those sidewalks are underwater for some period of the day during high tide. And they didn't build it that way. It's that sea level has risen. So the extreme weather, and gosh, we're seeing this across America, the extreme weather, whether it be fires, floods, wind, DC is right in that. And so we've got to prepare for that.
Yeah, one of the things that people don't realize, we're 125 plus or minus miles in, from the Atlantic Ocean, but we're only 3 feet above sea level. And so if any of the predictions are true, a lot of DC is going to be underwater in the next few years. But this balance between built infrastructures and community resources, how do you do that? And we're almost out of time, Tommy, so let's be quick.
Leave your viewers with this thought. What does heat do? And we know that when long periods of high heat will expand metal. So when we have longer and longer periods of high heat, our metro rails will warp. The train rails will warp. Everything slows down. And so it's just the science. We weren't built to be a city with this climate.
And I think that's true across the United States. And this is something I'll leave this up so we can go out in this. But implementation, I know this is something that you're very hands-on. You're out day in and day out into the community getting after these 77 actions. So the last question is how are we going to take these 77 actions and then blend this in the high priority, but actually be able to fund it and underwrite it? And we've got maybe about 45 seconds to do all that.
Well, the city's been very generous, and the city's done well, and the city's invested millions and millions of dollars. Each year I have around $50 to $70 million to invest in meeting our climate goals. And now that we have a new administration that believes strongly in climate change and that we have to do something about it, we're already seeing that we're getting new investments in partnership with the federal government. We can do this. I truly believe that we've got the will and we've got the smarts to get this done.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you just said. It's in the science. And it also is to look at the technologies as the best way, but involving people. And I know that's what you're doing, Tommy, when you're out in the communities. This is the Honorable Tommy Wells, and he's a director of the DOEE in Washington, D.C. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.